It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Bring us home here. We got our last interview of the day. Congressman Bruce Westerman is back with us. Congressman Bruce Westerman, thanks so much for being with us, sir.
Good morning, Paul. It sounds like another Johnny Cash Friday.
It certainly is. It certainly is. We've been having some fun. So, hey, I understand it is spring break, and I appreciate you spending some time with us. What's going on right now? Like, what's the mood right now in Washington, D.C.? I'm sure you're glad to be out of there.
I'm very grateful to be out of there. Normally, we're in D.C. during Arkansas spring break, so I get to see a lot of folks who travel to D.C. for spring break. I do some night tours of the Capitol and visit, but this year they had it scheduled where we're out of D.C. The week of spring break, so I've been back in the district this week, and that is good. My kids are out of college, and one's still in high school. He's out, so I've got to spend a little bit of time with them, but I've been making some visits around the district. But, you know, it's good for the American people when the Democratic-controlled House is adjourned and not in session.
It certainly is.
Less attacks on our freedoms and rights here in America.
Yeah, I mean, talk about this for a second. I mean, the Democrat Party, it's incredible. They want to lower the voting age to 16. They want to do away with the Electoral College. You got all these states signing onto these compacts saying that we're only going to give our Electoral College votes to the winner of the popular vote. You know, they're talking about universal basic income. I mean, they're just really far left stuff. I mean, and to me, I think they're afraid that they can't win in 2020 right now with how good President Trump's doing, in spite of the negative media coverage.
Yeah, they just they're kind of falling over themselves. But you know, I wish they would just go back and read the Constitution and read a little bit of the history of the founding of our country. The HR 1, that's what you were referring to, and a lot of those ideas you tossed out there. You know, it's the majority party gets the first 10 bill numbers, and historically, HR 1 gets assigned the highest priority piece of legislation, and the Democratic-controlled House assigned HR 1 as the act for the people. They should have called it the act for the politicians, because it's just horrible, the stuff they had in it. It is an attack on the Constitution. They want to move control of federal elections to the federal government and not to the states, as the Constitution calls out. It's got that little nugget in there where they would get a 6-to-1 match for every, say, I raised or got $100 campaign contribution, then the taxpayers would throw in another $600 to match my campaign contribution.
Huh.
They tried to get the voting age to 16 in that bill. They want to do away with any kind of voter ID. And then the Electoral College stuff wasn't in there, but that's something they're pushing for as well. And I just can't imagine someone from a small state supporting that. It shows a total lack of understanding of the founding of our country and why we even have a Senate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Senate is the voice of the minority, and it gives each state equal representation in Congress. I mean, if you're going to do away with the Electoral College, you might as well do away with the Senate. And by the way, I've heard them pushing for that we don't need a Senate anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And as frustrating as it is to work with the Senate sometimes, it was designed that way. And, you know, our two senators in Arkansas have just as much say and clout as the two senators from New York or the two senators from California. And same way, the two senators in Alaska have just as much say. So it's really disturbing what they're trying to do. And then you've got President Obama out there pushing for this election reform, as he calls it, agenda to try to gain back state legislatures and gain back House seats across the country. And it's even happening here in Arkansas. The guy from Little Rock that writes all these constitutional amendments and gets them on the ballot.
Is it David
they're
Couch?
pushing to, yeah, they're pushing to take control of redistricting away from the state legislature and give it to a nonpartisan commission. And there's no such thing as a nonpartisan commission. And I read part of what he had written there, and it's really it's sad and almost amusing that somebody would try to pull this over on the voters. But right now the majority party would draw the congressional districts in the state the way it's been ever since we've had a state, and Democrats have always drawn those districts. I get people complaining about how Republicans gerrymandered the congressional districts in Arkansas. Well, newsflash, Republicans have never drawn a congressional district in Arkansas, and 2020 would be the first time they would have a chance to do that, but the liberals just don't want that to happen. So the formula would be that the majority leader or the Speaker of the House and the minority leader would appoint someone to the commission. The majority leader and minority leader in the Senate would appoint someone to the commission. So here's your nonpartisan commission that's already got 4 partisan appointments to it, and it's and they're split equal. And then those 4 would determine the other members of the commission. And then if they couldn't come to an agreement, which guess what, they wouldn't be able to come to an agreement because you'd be split half Republican, half Democrat, then they draw the remaining names out of the hat. So where Democrats have no chance to draw the congressional districts right now without majorities in the state legislature, this would at least give them the chance to get a name drawn out of the hat and get the majority and try to draw the districts. But if you look at Arkansas, it would be really hard to draw a blue district in Arkansas. You would have to do some major gerrymandering to even do that. With the way people are voting in Arkansas right now. So, and all of that's coming from Obama. He's pushing that across the country, trying to gain back state houses that were lost during his administration and trying to, under the name of nonpartisan, create these partisan congressional commissions. So it's more of the same. You can just about bet if the Democrats label something, the real meaning of it's just the opposite. Like the Affordable Care Act was anything but affordable. This For the People's Act has nothing to do with people. It's more about the politicians. Their Medicare for All would not even come close to resembling Medicare. It would look a whole lot more like Medicaid. So that's the world we live in now.
Mm-hmm. Man. And I'm really glad you brought up that point about what could potentially happen in Arkansas now that the Democrats are not going to get to write the districts or draw the districts after the census coming up. I remember 10 years ago when they tried to draw them last time when Governor Beebe was in office, and it was a disaster even then. And now the Republicans, they hold these constitutional offices, they hold these majorities. And it should be them. I mean, it should be their turn to look at what the population is and draw some new districts. We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. You touched on something about the Electoral College and the Democrats' radical stance on that. They claim that they are the party, Bruce, of the minority, and yet they don't see this giant hypocritical position that they're taking, because I believe in minority rights. That's why I support the Electoral College, Yeah,
absolutely. If you do away with Electoral College, you're only going to see presidential candidates go to about 12 cities across the country. And what we get labeled as flyover country, we would really be flyover country then. People would just forget about the heart of America if we did away with Electoral College, and we would be very much underrepresented if that happened. Already the administration controls where infrastructure dollars are spent.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a president elected by the Electoral College or by the popular vote. Where do you think they're going to direct all the infrastructure money?
Yeah,
it's going to go to cities and urban areas. Our founders toiled over this on how to give states representation and also give the popular vote representation, and that's how they came up with two branches two houses in the legislative branch, the Senate and the House, and the Electoral College is based off of how many senators and House members you've got.
Let me ask you this: have you seen? I know this is a random question, but it'll make sense. Have you ever seen those movies, The Hunger Games?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Well,
you know how you have
got me watching those.
Okay, yeah, so you have these different districts, and the first district is the most well developed infrastructure wise, and the further you get out, the poorer it gets. You get rid of the Electoral College because that's based on population too. You get rid of Electoral College, and you're essentially we've got the Hunger Games at that point in terms of the way the districts are set up. Those places that are sparsely populated have no voice.
Right. Yep.
I mean, I'm not saying we're going to start killing everybody in Olympic Games or anything, Bruce. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, that was when I watched those movies, and I was forced to watch them. When I watched those movies, that's the first thing that struck me was, how the further you get away from the centralized power, the less the centralized power cares about those, because they don't have to care about those.
There's pretty good parallel illustration going on in our country right now, but at least we have the representation spread out across the country where states have an equal voice in the Senate, and it really bothers me. I've heard people in Arkansas say how unfair the Electoral College is, which shows a total lack of understanding about our country. We might as well go to a parliamentary style of government if we go to the Electoral College and just have a parliament that meets, and you could let the parliament select the prime minister or the president or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a total undermining of the foundations of our country when you start talking about doing away with the Electoral College.
Is there the feeling? I know this is what a lot of right-leaning news outlets have been saying this week. They've been saying, look, President Trump, it looks really good for his chances to be reelected in 2020. Is that the feeling among your Republican colleagues? And is that why the Democrats are now trying to, they're proposing, well, we need to change how we select a president? Is it because they know they're going to lose?
I don't know what they're thinking, but as long as they'll keep putting stuff out like the Green New Deal and Medicare for All and trying to take away your Second Amendment rights and trying to take away your First Amendment rights and basically every other piece of garbage that they present, I think the American people are going to see through it.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And it does give President Trump a strong leg up in the next election. But the way this country is kind of fickle, things can change on a dime here. So it's a long ways out to the election, and the Democrats are all racing to see who can get as far to the left as possible.
That's true.
And has there been a candidate join the race yet that hasn't fully embraced the Green New Deal?
I don't think so, and I think the most entertaining part of this Democrat presidential primary, Bruce, is going to be the president's Twitter feed during the debates. That's going to be I think more people are going to watch that than watch the debates, but that's just me. Bruce Westerman, we appreciate you coming on, sir, and thank you so much, and have a great rest of the weekend.
You too, Paul.
All righty.
Good to be with you.
Yes, sir. It's always
Bye-bye.
great to have you on.